a lady, Chatterley's a lover. I need women sometimes. I refuse to make a mountain of it, and I refuse anybody's moral condemnation or prohibition. I'd be ashamed to see a woman walking around with my name label on her, address and railway station like a wardrobe trunk. These two men had not forgiven each other about the junior flirtation. "It's an amusing idea, Charlie," said Jukes, "that sex is just another form of talk, where you act the words instead of saying them. I suppose it's quite true. I suppose we might exchange as many sensations and emotions with women as we do ideas about the weather, and so on. Sex might be a sort of normal physical conversation between a man and a woman. You don't talk to a woman unless you have ideas in common. That is, you don't talk with any interest. And in the same way, unless you had some emotion or sympathy in common with a woman, you wouldn't sleep with her. But if you have the proper sort of emotions or sympathy with a woman, you ought to sleep with her," said May. "It's the only decent thing to go to bed with her. Just as when you are interested talking to someone, the only decent thing is to talk out. You don't prudishly put your tongue between your teeth and bite it. You just say out your words. You just say, and the same the other way." "No," said Hammond, "it's wrong. You, for example, May, you squander half your force with women. You'll never really do what you should do. With a fine mind such as yours, too much of it goes the other way." "Maybe it does. And too little of you goes that way, Hammond, my boy, married or not. You can keep the purity and integrity of your mind, but it's going damn dry. Your pure mind is going as dry as fiddlesticks, from what I see of it. You're simply talking it down." Tommy Jukes burst into a laugh. "Go it, you two minds," he said. "Look at me. I don't do any high and pure mental work, nothing but jot down a few ideas. And yet I neither marry nor run after women. I think Charlie's quite right. If he wants to run after the women, he's quite free not to run too often. But I wouldn't prohibit him from running. As for Hammond, he's got a property instinct. So naturally, the straight road and the narrow gate are right for him. You'll see, he'll be an English man of letters before he's done. ABC from top to toe. Then there's me. I'm nothing. Just a squib. And what about you, Clifford? Do you think sex is a dynamo to help a man on to success in the world?" Clifford rarely talked much at these times. He never held forth. His ideas were really not vital enough for it. He was too confused and emotional. Now he blushed and looked uncomfortable. "Well," he said, "being myself hors de combat, I don't see I've anything to say on the matter." "Not at all," said Jukes. "The top of you's by no means hors de combat. You've got the life of the mind sound and intact, so let us hear your ideas." "Well," stammered Clifford, "even then I don't suppose I have much idea. I suppose marry and have done with it would pretty well stand for what I think. Though, of course, between a man and a woman who care for one another, it is a great thing. What sort of great thing? Said Tommy. Oh, it perfects the intimacy, said Clifford, uneasy as a woman in such talk. Well, Charlie, and I believe that sex is a sort of communication, like speech. Let any woman start a sex conversation with me, and it's natural for me to go to bed with her, to finish it, all in due season. Unfortunately, no woman makes any particular start with me, so I go to bed by myself, and I'm done, the worse for it. I hope so anyway, for how should I know? Anyhow, I've no starry calculations to be interfered with and no immortal words to write. I'm merely a fellow skulking in the army. Silence fell. The four men smoked, and Connie sat there and put another stitch in her sewing. Yes, she sat there. She had to sit mum. She had to be quiet as a mouse, not to interfere with the immensely important speculations of these highly mental gentlemen. But she had to be there. They didn't get on so well without her. Their ideas didn't flow so freely. Clifford was much more hedgy and nervous. He got cold feet much quicker in Connie's absence, and the talk didn't run. Tommy Jukes came off best. He was a little inspired by her presence. Hammond, she didn't really like. He seemed so selfish in a mental way. And Charles May, though she liked something about him, seemed a little distasteful and messy in spite of his stars. How many evenings had Connie sat and listened to the manifestation of these four men, these and one or two others, that they never seemed to get anywhere, didn't trouble her deeply. She liked to hear what they had to say, especially when Tommy was there. It was fun. Instead of men kissing you and touching you with their bodies, they revealed their minds to you. It was great fun. But what cold minds. And also, it was a little irritating. She had more respect for Michaelis, on whose names they all poured such withering contempt, as a little mongrel arrivist and uneducated bounder of the worst sort. Mongrel and bounder or not, he jumped to his own conclusions. He didn't merely walk round with millions of words in the parade of the life of the mind. Connie quite liked the life of the mind and got a great thrill out of it. But she did think it overdid itself a little. She loved being there, amid the tobacco smoke of those famous evenings of the cronies, as she called them privately to herself. She was infinitely amused and proud, too, that even their talking they could not do without her silent presence. She had an immense respect for thought, and these men, at least, tried to think honestly. But somehow there was a cat, and it wouldn't jump. They all alike talked at something, though what it was, for the life of her, she couldn't say. It was something that Mick didn't clear either. But then Mick wasn't trying to do anything, but just get through his life and put as much across other people as they tried to put across him. He was really antisocial, which was what Clifford and his cronies had against him. Clifford and his cronies were not antisocial. They were more or less bent on saving mankind, or on instructing it, to say the least. There was a gorgeous talk on Sunday evening when the conversation drifted again to love. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts and kindred something or other, said Tommy Jukes. I'd like to know what the tie is. The tie that binds us just now is mental friction on one another. And apart from that, there's damned little tie between us. We bust apart and say spiteful things about one another, like all the other damn intellectuals in the world. Damned everybody's as far as that goes, for they all do it. Else we bust apart and cover up the spiteful things we feel against one another by saying false sugaries. It's a curious thing that the mental life seems to flourish with its roots in spite, ineffable and fathomless spite. Always has been so. Look at Socrates in Plato and his bunch round him. The sheer spite of it all, just sheer joy in pulling somebody else to bits. Protagoras, or whoever it was, and Alcibiades, and all the other little disciple dogs joining in the fray. I must say it makes one prefer Buddha, quietly sitting under a bow tree, or Jesus telling his disciples little Sunday stories, peacefully and without any mental fireworks. No, there's something wrong with the mental life radically. It's rooted in spite and envy and spite. Ye shall know the tree by its fruit. I don't think we're altogether so spiteful, protested Clifford. Oh, my dear Clifford, think of the way we talk each other over, all of us. I mean, I'm rather worse than anybody else myself, because I infinitely prefer the spontaneous spite to the concocted sugaries. Now, they are poison. When I begin saying what a fine fellow Clifford is, etc., then poor Clifford is to be pitied. For God's sake, all of you, say spiteful things about me, then I shall know I mean something to you. Don't say sugaries, or I'm done. Oh, but I do think we honestly like one another, said Hammond. I tell you, we must. We say such spiteful things to one another, about one another, behind our backs. I'm the worst. And I do think you confuse the mental life with the critical activity. I agree with you. Socrates gave the critical activity a grand start, but he did more than that, said Charlie May, rather magisterially. The cronies had such a curious pomposity under their assumed modesty. It was all so ex cathedra, and it all pretended to be so humble. Jukes refused to be drawn about Socrates. That's quite true. Criticism and knowledge are not the same thing, said Hammond. They aren't, of course, chimed in Berry, a brown, shy young man who had called to see Jukes and was staying the night. They all looked at him as if the ass had spoken. I wasn't talking about knowledge, I was talking about the mental life, laughed Jukes. Real knowledge comes out of the whole corpus of the consciousness, out of your belly and your penis as much as out of your brain and mind. The mind can only analyze and rationalize. Set the mind and the reason to cock it over the rest, and all they can do is to criticize and make a deadness. I say, all they can do. It is vastly important. My God, the world needs criticizing today, criticizing to death. Therefore, let's live the mental life and glory in our spite and strip the rotten old show. But mind you, it's like this. While you live your life, you are in some way an organic whole with all life. But once you start the mental life, you pluck the apple. You've severed the connection between the apple and the tree, the organic connection. And if you've got nothing in your life but the mental life, then you yourself are a plucked apple. You've fallen off the tree, and then it is a logical necessity to be spiteful, just as it's a natural necessity for a plucked apple to go bad. Clifford made big eyes. It was all stuff to him. Connie secretly laughed to herself. Well then, we're all plucked apples, said Hammond, rather acidly and reluctantly. So, let's make cider of ourselves, said Charlie. Okay, you must join. Listen to the next video. See what's taking place in Lady Chatterley's Lover. This is Morale. Bernard say, do join me for the next video of Lady Chatterley's Lover. Bye-bye for now.